as many votes as people supporting Trump gain, they risk losing it on the other side. And you saw that energy, especially on the progressive left, in the Democratic primary in Florida. This was a surprise win for Gillum, who was clearly trending that way, but surpassed expectations. And that does say something about energy heading into the fall on the Democratic side. And that does say something about, again, an equal and opposite force against what Trump can do.
And then behind the scenes, how is President Trump feeling heading into the midterms? Because obviously in public he acts quite bullish, but then in private, as we've been discussing, there was this leaked audio of a closed-door meeting with evangelicals, no cameras, but some participant leaked the audio of President Trump resorting to fear-mongering tactics, saying if Democrats win, there'll be violence, and suggesting that they perhaps spread that message at the pulpit. That tells you somebody who's quite nervous about what's going to happen.
Remember, we last heard this, or who at least is willing to do anything to try to excite his own people, right? We last heard about that potential violence around Donald Trump's nomination in July of 2016, when some of his supporters, I think it was mostly Roger Stone, but perhaps a couple of others, were talking about the threat of violence if Donald Trump was denied the nomination after he had won all of those primaries. Sure, you are going to have people who are going to be upset, and there are going to be real arguments about fairness of process if Donald Trump had lost it. But saying there is going to be violence, look at this dangerous for you outcome that you're facing. This is not a new tactic for the president, but it still is really striking to hear a president saying it. This is not candidate Trump anymore.
And you've known it for a long time. He knows what he's saying.
Yes, he knows exactly what he's saying.
He's choosing these words specifically and carefully and for a reason.
Yes, and look, he has been warned repeatedly that there are problems with that kind of language. He doesn't care. It is where he wants to go. It is what he thinks is going to have the most impact. He bases a lot of his actions on shock, and we've seen this over and over. So this isn't a surprise, but he doesn't have a whole lot of other bags of tricks, because even in a great economy, they are still facing a potential loss of the House. There are some Democrats who are feeling more bullish about the Senate than they had been. They are facing, it's not definite, they are facing the risk of a Democratic wave. And so he doesn't have a whole lot of tricks in his bag to try to move against it. This is always one that he resorts to.
Okay, Attorney General Jeff Sessions and his fate. We've heard that, obviously the president continues to criticize him publicly, but we've also heard now that he is speaking with his top aides and lawyers, personal lawyers, about firing Jeff Sessions. What do we think his longevity?
He's been doing that for a year. There's really not a change. Since last July, when he actually got a resignation letter from Jeff Sessions, that he then got back from Jeff Sessions and undid because he was warned that this was going to be a disaster. Firing Jeff Sessions has been a hot stove that he has not wanted to touch, and he has known that he can't do, because the last time that he touched a hot stove was firing James Comey, and he got Mueller. So in some ways, Mueller has actually led to job protection for Jeff Sessions. The firing of Comey has led to job protection for Jeff Sessions. That said, it's a dysfunctional relationship and has been for some time. And so you have Republicans who now recognize that this might not be sustainable this way. Maybe we can make a change after November. However, for all the times that Lindsey Graham says that, I'm not really certain who he has in mind as the replacement, because there is still going to be an uphill battle on confirmation. This has been the issue for the president the whole time, is getting new cabinet members approved. That would be very much the case with Jeff Sessions, especially depending on how he left. We keep hearing that Jeff Sessions is getting tired of it. We've heard that repeatedly, too. As one two top Trump advisors has said to me, he wants to fire Jeff Sessions every day. This has not changed. And so there are days when he has gotten closer to it than others. But I think that you are just going to see a status quo heading into November.
The one change really is the language that Lindsey Graham and some other senators have chosen to use, which opens up a different type of window. I don't know if it's an August-September window or a November-December window. Those are two very different things.
Correct.
We'll see.
I don't think it's an August-September window. I think it is about greasing the skids heading into the fall. I don't think that was about the president's itchy trigger finger right now.
Let's talk about someone who's been in the middle of these discussions, or at least was, because I don't know how much he's talking with the president these days at all, which is White House counsel Don McGahn.
He's not talking to the president very much.
Well, that says a little bit. Yeah. Axios is reporting this morning that it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when Don McGahn leaves the White House, which is actually something that CNN and others have been reporting to an extent for a while, too. Axios makes it seem more imminent. Maggie, you obviously, the New York Times had that blockbuster reporting that McGahn had been talking at length with the special counsel. Where is this relationship?
This relationship is basically in the past in terms of being a relationship that coexists in the White House. We had heard that McGahn was likely / expected to leave after the Kavanaugh hearings, assuming that he does get nominated or does get cleared and Senate approved, because then he will feel like he has left his mark, and that will be really what he was there for, in part, was to steer these judicial appointments through. But there is no real relationship. Emmett Flood has been talked about as a replacement. I'm not positive that that's actually going to happen. Emmett Flood is currently handling the Mueller probe. He was the replacement for Ty Cobb, internally dealing with that. But the president's two favorite punching bags have been Jeff Sessions and Don McGahn. And
experience for some of them. I want to show you this card, though. This hearse right here actually brought Aretha Franklin's father to his final resting place, Rosa Parks, and now Aretha Franklin. And today that gold casket arrived probably about a half hour ago, and people got silent here once again as she arrived here. But this has really been the story. This right here, the hordes of people that have been coming from all over the country who wanted to pay their respects. As you can see again, it has started to wrap itself all the way around the building. One of the things they talked about is making sure they play the contemporary Aretha Franklin on the outside, but on the inside, it's been all gospel music. And there's been a lot of talk about how she looks on the inside with the red dress and the heels. People have been talking about it all the time, but they love Aretha Franklin here, especially in Detroit. Someone who fed the homeless, someone who took their time. Now, you talked about this is the second day of this event. We know tomorrow is the concert. People have been talking about that. Only 6,000 tickets. So you have Ariana Grande, Faith Hill, Stevie Wonder, Jennifer Hudson. People have been focused on that because they just want to stand outside and see if they can hear some of that. And then, of course, Friday is the funeral, and we know that Bill Clinton will be there, and so will Jesse Jackson. But this is what people have been focused on in Detroit, a chance to pay their respects to the Queen of Soul. It was a special day yesterday. It'd be interesting to see how it all wraps up once again today.
All right, Ryan, thank you very much for being there and covering all of that. We'll be watching. So there are these new numbers from Puerto Rico, and they spiked the death toll after Hurricane Maria to the number of deaths. Well, now, almost a year later, the revised death toll finds nearly 3,000 people were killed by the storm, not 64 people. So the new number is 46 times higher than the government's previous estimate. And joining us now is San Juan Mayor Carmen Yulín Cruz. Mayor, thank you so much for being here with us. How did the government get the official number so wrong from 64, which is what they said, to we now know 3,000?
Well, sometimes people don't want to handle the truth. When we were walking around Puerto Rico, we were walking around San Juan, we could see the devastation. And we knew that there were people dependent on life support systems, on insulin, chemotherapy, dialysis, that because they had no power, they weren't able to receive that. So today is a very sad day and a very shameful day, because those that did not want to see the truth, and I'm hearing today, this is ridiculous, people from the administration, the Puerto Rican government saying, well, nobody is ever very prepared for Hurricane 5. Well, that may be true, but the one thing that we were prepared for was to tell the truth. And just as I saw it, just as I knew that this wasn't a good news story, that people were dying and that the bureaucracy and inefficiency were killing us, everybody should have had the presence of mind to just go out and tell the truth. But they didn't want to tell the truth because they wanted to sing to the tune of Donald Trump and the spin of the good news story. Well, now it's proven. This is a people died story. This is not a number. It's 2,975 people, and they're still calling it an estimate. 2,975 people that will never see the light of day, and many of them died because of neglect. Neglect that was done by the Trump administration and that was silently approved by most of the political class in Puerto Rico.
And so, Mayor, who do you hold responsible?
Well, you know, everybody is responsible. But there were people in power that had the opportunity to request more aid, to request the aid when it was reasonable, to request the aid when it was needed, to tell the truth, and they didn't tell the truth. And the governor of Puerto Rico sat there besides the president when he said, oh, 16? You ought to be commended. That's not a real disaster. Katrina is a real disaster. Well, Katrina was a real disaster. And now we have more deaths than Katrina. And what comes out of the White House yesterday is simply we are very proud and we are of what we did and we are very committed. The Trump administration killed the Puerto Rican with neglect. The Trump administration led us to believe that they were helping when they weren't really up to par and they weren't doing, and they didn't allow other countries